Well, hi, folks. I'm Chris Dorr here with Ohio Gun Owners, and this video is going to be a follow-up video regarding some of the excuses that the Blue 28 rhinos are trying to use to get cover for their votes against the most important pro-gun bill of the entire 135th Ohio General Assembly. I'm talking about SAPA. I'd like to apologize right out of the gate that these videos are longer than the 3-second reels we've all become accustomed to. Sadly, to unpack these things, it takes more than just a 3-second reel because, as Jordan Peterson likes to say, there aren't simple solutions to complex problems. And the rhino problem in Columbus is a very complex one. So this video is a follow-up to our previous video on Representative Creech from Preble County, to address some of the comments that he made in response to our first video. We're focusing on his comments a lot right now because a lot of the talking points that he's pushing out are being copied and then mimicked by the other members of the Blue 28 who killed off the Ohio Second Amendment Preservation Act, which we call SAPA for short, and there's a picture of him right there. Now, in that first video, we already dealt with some of the obvious contradictions that Representative Creech made in his excuses for voting against the Second Amendment. In that video, we covered several things. Like, number one, we showed how the bill sections that he says prohibits Ohio law enforcement from using NIBIN was actually clearly dealt with only a couple of paragraphs later in the bill. We pointed out how Representative Creech wasn't being upfront with people about the financial motives that Ohio's political law enforcement gun control organizations have in wanting to kill off SAPA and how they want to be a part of future ATF gun control task forces because of the massive amount of federal dollars that come along with those joint task forces, which they've already raked in over $200 million from the federal equitable sharing program, and how those monies are discretionary funds that the law enforcement groups don't have to account to voters for. It's all about the money. Number three, we already explained how the excuse that the Senate doesn't want this bill is just that. It's an excuse. And we already dealt with that. And number four, we explained how lame duck session is the legislative session that occurs after the November elections and before the newly elected General Assembly is sworn in, and how lame duck session is the time when the legislators all get back together, even though some of them have already been unelected by their districts or they've been termed out. They all get back together to pass all of the bills that couldn't pass or that they didn't want to pass in the regular session for fear of backlash from the voters. Of Quite frankly, lame duck should be outlawed. Number 5, we explained how during lame duck session, it is very sadly normal to see insane legislative maneuvering in order to get bills across the finish line. As an example of that, we talked about how the Senate just last week crammed 18 amendments. That's 18 other bills that didn't get passed during regular session. They crammed 18 amendments all into one bill and sent it over to the House. We explained that these omnibus bills, multiple bills all bunched together, are so bad during lame duck session that they are referred to as Christmas tree bills, because everybody throws everything they want that didn't get passed during regular session. They throw it all under that main bill, just like a Christmas tree. They load it up and they ram that thing through. And number 7, and very importantly, we pointed out how when these legislators hide behind the statement that law enforcement is against SAPA, the groups they're referring to are the same lobby groups that oppose concealed carry way back in 2004. They opposed constitutional carry and stand your ground law in 2020 and 2022 as well. They are the gun control lobby, the very people, the very entities that we have been fighting against and who are working against our Second Amendment. But now I want to bring you some receipts. I want to show you with even more clarity exactly how in bed people like Rodney Creech are with these gun control organizations. How instead of representing you, their constituents in their districts, to the power in Columbus, they instead end up representing those powerful special interest groups from Columbus back to you, their districts, their voters, and they tell you what you need to settle for. So let me pop up this image here for you as an example. This image is what I like to call brass tacks. This is where we're finally getting past all of the bull excuses that Rodney was trying to bring up earlier, and where he finally admits who he's working for. And here's a hint. It's not you, the gun voters in his district. He says right here, he says, I, along with BSSA, FOP, prosecutors, and many great legislators, disagree with you. He's got a little American flag there. That's pretty stupid, because what he's saying is not very American. BSSA stands for Buckeye State Sheriff's Association, and they do not lobby for gun rights. They are a gun control lobby in Ohio. Here's a picture of Matt Lutz, BSSA's president at the time, and the sheriff of Muskingum County. Here he is testifying in the House Federalism Committee against House Bill 178. By the way, I took this picture. You know what House Bill 178 was? That was constitutional carry. BSSA, Matt Lutz, as their lobbyist, stood there in his taxpayer-funded uniform and testified against constitutional carry. You know who that red shirt brigade is sitting behind him there? All those ladies? That's Michael Bloomberg's Ohio chapter of Moms Demand Action. And they were there saying the exact same things that the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association was saying against constitutional carry. But here we have Rodney Creech, a Republican, saying that their opposition to this tremendous gun rights protection bill is one of his reasons why he's opposed to it. The BSSA's opposition is one of the reasons why he's opposed to it. What about the FOP? He lists them off there. Number 2 in this list. The FOP, the Fraternal Order of Police, their lobbyist is a guy named Michael Weinman, and I've run into him now at the State House for years. The FOP, Michael Weinman, and his organization testified against House Bill 228, which repealed the duty to retreat. And they testified against House Bill 178, which was constitutional carry. House Bill 227, Senate Bill 215, all of those were constitutional carry bills, and they testified against them. They even repealed, I'm talking about the FOP here, who Rodney says is one of the reasons why he voted against SAPA. They even testified against House Bill 142, which repealed Ohio's dumb duty to notify law that no criminal ever obeyed. Anyway, but there goes Rodney Creech using their opposition to SAPA as an excuse to kill the bill. Let me pop that comment up here again. There we go. What about the prosecutors? He's lists off the prosecutors. Well, they're officially called the Ohio Prosecuting Attorneys Association. And I'm glad Creech brought them up, too, because they and their lobbyist, Lou Tobin, as well, have a huge record of opposing and testifying against gun rights bills like House Bill 228, which was the watered down stand your ground bill, House Bill 178, which was constitutional carry. They testified against House Bill 201, which is the duty to notify repeal bill. They testified against House Bill 381, which was the full blown stand your ground law. And heck, they even opposed House Bill 248 and wanted to outlaw the private sale of antique firearms between individuals unless you run that data into the federal gun owner database. You see what's going on here? Rodney Creech is siding with them, Ohio's gun control lobby, instead of you, the gun owners who helped elect him. Let me pop up this one last image for you here, because this one very important, very clearly illustrates the point I'm making here. Look at this one. He says, there it goes. Let me just read this off. He says, please visit my personal page or state rep page for more info. There are unintended consequences with this bill. He never can say what they are publicly because they don't exist. But listen to what he says. He says, Sheriff Simpson, FOP, and prosecutors were all against it as it will hinder them working with drug and child trafficking task forces. So he lists Sheriff Simpson in this comment, along with the FOP and prosecutors, as entities that were against or are against SAPA. But before I make my point about Sheriff Simpson, I want to first get that last part of his sentence out of the way, where he says that they were all against it because it will hinder them working with local police and on drug and child trafficking task forces. If Rodney would read the bill, he would know that there is belt and suspenders language in it that specifically say that nothing about this bill shall be interpreted to interfere with Ohio law enforcement's ability to partner with federal task forces on drug and human trafficking task forces. It literally says it in the bill. I'm going to read it off for you. I want you guys to know this. Nothing in this section shall be construed to prohibit a public officer or employee of the state or a political subdivision from participating in an interjurisdictional task force for the purpose of enforcing laws not related to firearms, firearm accessories, or ammunition. It does not prohibit them at all from working on drug and child trafficking task forces. So either Creech is deliberately misleading people by saying that, or he has not read the bill, or he cannot read. But that is absolutely not the truth. But back to the Sheriff Simpson reference, and this is what I want you guys to know. Sheriff Mike Simpson, the Preble County Sheriff, is the former lobbyist for the Ohio Buckeye State Sheriff's Association. And Sheriff Simpson is a full-blown gun control supporter. In fact, Simpson is so much a gun control activist that he came to the Ohio State House and testified publicly in favor of Mike DeWine's omnibus gun control bill that DeWine had introduced after the Dayton shooting, which was called Senate Bill 221, Strong Ohio. Okay? That's the same gun bill that you and I and thousands of other pro-gun voters all across the state worked very hard to block from passing. Simpson testified, again, this is the guy that Rodney Creech is using. His objections to SAPA are what Rodney Creech is using as an excuse to vote against it. Simpson testified in favor of creating seller's certificates. He testified in favor of civil liability if you did not get one of those certificates when selling a firearm. He supported the red flag portion of the bill. He had a whole testimony, huge testimony in favor of the bill, which you guys can go and look up for yourselves. It was Senate Bill 221, and he finished it off by saying this. He said, in closing, Senate Bill 221 provides much needed enhancements and tools to both law enforcement and the courts to address gaps in our current system. Preble County Sheriff Mike Simpson isn't pro-gun. He's pro-power. And he testified in favor of one of the biggest omnibus gun control bills ever introduced in the Ohio General Assembly. But folks, this is Rodney Creech. This is the cover that he's trying to use to get out from the responsibility he now bears from breaking away from the Republican majority, joining the gun-grabbing Democrats, and voting no on the biggest gun rights bill to make it to the floor of the Ohio House, this General Assembly. To wrap this video up, take a look at the vote board here from that day. This is the actual SAPA vote. Now, Creech is pretending that he did the right thing with his vote here, but I'd like to point out some of the people who joined him in voting against SAPA. Again, now this is a motion to kill SAPA, so a no vote, the red vote, was the pro-gun vote, and a green yes vote was the gun control vote. Creech is telling you that he was doing the right thing, but look at these other votes up there on the board. Munira Abdullah, or whatever her name is, Ismail Muhammad, okay, Casey Weinstein, who else? Adam Miller, Joseph Miller, Danny Isaacson, Democrat Minority Leader Allison Rousseau. I mean, if a picture can say 1,000 words, this one is saying at least is showing you that Representative Rodney Creech voted against the staunch conservative members of the caucus. Look at, you have Jennifer Gross voted no, Beth Lear, DJ Swearingen. Heck, even look at that. Even Rodney Creech's neighboring district, Thomas Hall, voted no on tabling the bill. We could sit here and parse through these things like crazy, but now you know the truth about Rodney Creech, and I hope you will share this with all of your pro-gun, pro-freedom friends. When he was needed the most, Rep. Rodney Creech bailed on the House Republican majority. He paired up with the gun-grabbing Democrats, and he paired up with Ohio's gun control lobby groups, and he voted no on the biggest Second Amendment bill that ever landed on his desk. So don't ever let him lie to you about how pro-2A he is, how we just need to fix the bill and we'll vote for it next time. He's trying to lie about his record and his vote in the hopes